Once upon a time, on the edge of a deep forest, lived a little girl. She was called Little Red Riding Hood because she always wore a coat as red as a cardinal's wings. She loved to wander in the woods and listen to the birds' songs. And she liked to make friends with all the small animals who made their homes in the forest. Her mother would sometimes worry when Little Red Riding Hood wandered alone in the forest. The woods are deep, she would think, and not all the animals there are friendly ones. Often she would walk down the path to the forest and wait for her little daughter to come home. One day, a woman came to the mother's door. She was a neighbor of Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. "The grandmother is sick," she said. The mother prepared a basket of food. Then she called to Little Red Riding Hood. "Grandmother is sick," the mother said. "Take this basket of food to her. Be careful going through the forest. Don't stop, but go straight to Grandmother's house," she told her. Little Red Riding Hood promised she would go straight to her grandmother's. But when she got into the forest, she forgot her promise. She stopped to watch a squirrel climbing a tree trunk. She stopped to play with a rabbit who was sitting on a tree stump. She stopped to count the pretty butterflies who were fluttering around her as she sat on the path. Nearby, a big, bad, black wolf watched. Before long, he walked up to Little Red Riding Hood. "Hello," she said to him. "I'm Little Red Riding Hood. Who are you?" "I am a wolf, and a friendly fellow," said the wolf in a gentle, high voice that was not like his real gruff growl at all. "Where are you going with that basket of food, Red Riding Hood?" "I'm taking food to my grandmother's. She lives deep in the woods." "She is sick. I must hurry," said Little Red Riding Hood. "I can't stay and talk to you." The wolf watched her as she ran down the path and out of sight. "I am hungry," said the wolf to himself. "Her grandmother should make a tasty meal for me. I'll run fast through the trees and get to Grandmother's house before Little Red Riding Hood." He ran and ran until he was within sight of the grandmother's house. He loped to the door and knocked. "Who's there?" cried the grandmother. "Red Riding Hood," cried the wolf, in the gentle, high voice that was not like his real gruff growl at all. "Come in. Come in, dear Riding Hood," said the grandmother. But when the door opened, she saw not Little Red Riding Hood, but the big, bad, black wolf. He rushed into the grandmother's house, and before you could say boo, he ate the grandmother up. Then he put on the grandmother's cap and nightgown. And he climbed into the grandmother's bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. In the meantime, Little Red Riding Hood was walking through the woods. She wanted to stop and play with the animals, but now she remembered her promise to go straight to her grandmother's house. So she ran all the way. When she got to the grandmother's house, she found the door open. "Grandmother, are you there?" she called. "Yes, my dear," called the wolf, in the gentle, high voice that was not like his real gruff growl at all. "Come in. Come in, my dear," he called. When Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf, she was astonished to see how different her grandmother looked. "Grandmother, Grandmother," she said, "what large eyes you have." "All the better to see you, my child," the wolf said. "Grandmother, Grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you, my child," the wolf said. Grandmother, Grandmother, she said, what long arms you have.
All the better to hug you with,
the wolf said. And he grabbed Little Red Riding Hood. And he swallowed her up in one big gulp. His stomach was now so immense that he could hardly walk. But at last he managed to balance himself on his back paws. He waddled slowly out of the house. Then he lay down under a nearby tree and went to sleep. A woodsman going by decided to stop to visit the grandmother. First he noticed that the grandmother's door was ajar. That is not like her, he thought. She always keeps her door shut tight. He went into the house. It was empty. Puzzled, he went out of the house. Then, near the door, he saw the wolf asleep. What an enormous stomach he has, the woodsman said to himself. He must have eaten the poor grandmother. With one quick stroke of his axe, the woodsman opened wide the wolf's fat stomach. And out popped the grandmother, and out popped Little Red Riding Hood.
Thank you for saving our lives,
cried the grandmother. Thank you, cried Little Red Riding Hood. I will stop to pick flowers in the forest, said Little Red Riding Hood. But never, never, never will I stop to talk to a wolf.
This is the story of bad witches, good genies, and a magic ring. In a faraway country, a great king died. His son, the prince, mourned his father, whom he had loved very much. The king had barely died before his wicked cousin took over the throne that rightfully belonged to the little prince.
I shall be king,
the wicked cousin told the prince.
You will go to work as the lowliest of all my subjects.
And the wicked cousin commanded 2 of his guards to lead the little prince down to the garden. The little prince was unhappy to lose his throne, but he went to work with a good will. The head gardener, on orders from a wicked cousin, treated him worse than if he had been a stray dog. He beat him. He piled the table in his house high with good things to eat in front of him. The little prince watched eagerly, for he was very hungry. But the gardener gave him nothing. He ate everything up himself. The little prince was very unhappy until his eye caught the gleam of the ring on his finger that his father had given him before he died. Maybe it is a magic ring, the prince said to himself, and he twisted it around his finger. It was a magic ring, for suddenly there appeared in front of the prince a tall genie who said, I am your servant. Whatever you want, I will see that your wish comes true. The prince thought for a moment, then said, I think of all the things I could wish for, I wish most to be invisible. Whoosh! With one wave of his wand, the genie covered the prince with a magic cloud that no one could see through. The prince could still see himself, but no one could see him. He ran into the garden and tore a branch from a tree there. He looked around him until he found the head gardener who had starved and beaten him. The prince took his stick and he beat the gardener. He then walked, unseen, through the courtyard of the palace. Unseen by the courtiers, the prince walked into the throne room. Unseen, he climbed up on the throne itself where the wicked cousin sat. He took his stick, which was also, of course, invisible, and he beat the wicked cousin's back. The wicked cousin leaped up in the air. He jumped down off the throne. He fell on the floor. He rushed out of the palace. All the courtiers and the little prince followed him to see what he was going to do. The wicked cousin ran to a pond in the garden. Silly man, he thought the water would ease the pain of the blows the prince had given him. Instead, he almost drowned himself. He would have drowned if his courtiers had not pulled him out of the water. The little prince at first was pleased with what he had done while he was invisible. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized he had accomplished nothing except to make the wicked cousin look ridiculous. In the meantime, the wicked cousin had not been idle. He called for a wicked witch he knew to appear before him.
Can you rescue me from whatever invisible thing is annoying me?
He asked her.
Be at ease, the witch cackled. I have black magic glasses that let me see what is invisible to everybody else.
The little prince wandered through the palace courtyard, thinking he was safe because he was invisible. But the witch, with the aid of her black magic glasses, could see him. She threw a huge cloth all over him. He was a captive. 2 soldiers carried him between them to the dungeon of the castle. The soldiers twisted a chain around his ankles, locked the door, and left him alone. Alone until he remembered the magic ring. He had only twisted it once before his friendly genie appeared. No more pranks with sticks, the little prince told him. Now I need a whole army to defeat my wicked cousin as soon as you can get me out of this dungeon. With one wave of his wand, the genie unlocked the chain which held the prince down, broke the dungeon's wall, and conjured up an army for the prince. They marched into the palace and set fire to it. The flames leaped up to the skies. The wicked cousin was forced to flee. The little prince, no longer invisible, was made the king. All his people rejoiced. In no time, his loyal soldiers rebuilt the burnt castle. It was more beautiful than before. The little prince sat on his throne, proud and content. I shall try to be a good king, like my father was, he said to himself. I no longer have any need of a magic ring if I remember to be good and just to all my people. And he took the magic ring and threw it up into the sky. The ring sailed away, up to the moon. The invisible prince was now the good king whom everybody could see. He and his people lived happily ever after.
In the faraway land of Persia, the new year begins on the first day of spring. Every year on that day, Uncle New Year visits every home in Persia. He puts on his felt hat, ties his blue sash, and reaches for his cane. I am ready to bring the new year to everyone, he says to himself as he begins his journey. Just outside the gate to a large city is the prettiest garden in all of Persia. Golden apples, luscious pears, plump oranges, juicy limes, and delectable nuts of all kinds grow there. Around the edge of the garden, marigolds, violets, tulips, and morning glories bloom. But the freshest, loveliest flowers are the roses. In Persia, they are called everspring flowers because the blossoms are always as fresh as the first day of spring. A cheerful old woman owns the garden. She wants to see Uncle New Year.
If I see him, I will become young again.
So, on the first day of spring, she rises very early to prepare for his visit. She washes her face and puts on her dress.
My house must be neat and tidy for Uncle New Year's visit. I must make the bed and sweep the floor.
Because Uncle New Year loves the garden, she tends it carefully. She trims the hedges and waters the flowers. Then she walks over to the tile pool in the center of the garden, where goldfish swim in the clear, fresh water.
Uncle New Year likes the fountain turned on. Now I must make myself look pretty.
She takes out her best vest, made of richly patterned silk. She brings her mirror out to the veranda where she combs her long white hair and ties her golden scarf around her head. Then she pinches her cheeks to make them look rosy.
I must light a fire for the water pipe. Uncle New Year likes rose petals in the bottom.
Then the old woman carefully arranges 7 gifts on a tray for Uncle New Year. Everyone in Persia leaves him a gift. The old woman fills 7 crystal dishes with 7 delicious foods whose names begin with the letter S.
At last, I am ready for Uncle New Year's visit.
She sits down on a carpet to wait. But Uncle New Year does not come right away. The old woman continues to wait. Still, Uncle New Year does not come.
I feel tired.
Her eyes begin to close. Soon she is fast asleep. She dreams about meeting Uncle New Year and smiles in her sleep. While she is sleeping, Uncle New Year finally comes. Ah, what a beautiful garden. What lovely roses. I shall pick one. He sees the old woman sleeping on the veranda. He walks over to her. This year, as every year, he bends down and sees her happy face. He, too, smiles. She looks so peaceful. I will not awaken her. But he gently tucks the rose into her hair, as he has done many times in the past. Next, he sits down near the tray and cuts a large apple in half. I will eat 1/2 and leave half for this old lady. I will enjoy the water pipe and relax for a few minutes. But I must leave. Time is short, and I must visit many more houses. He slowly walks through the garden gate and begins his journey to the next house. The old woman is still sleeping. The sun slowly rises. The bright light shines on the old woman. She is beginning to awaken. She rubs her eyes.
Ah, Uncle New Year has been here. I had missed him again. Now I must wait for Uncle New Year to make me young, just like this rose.